Ten, 9, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here with you. This is your host, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, and I'm happy to be here on the Exceptional Conservative Network with our program, No Soundbites Allowed. It's a great time to be here with you folks. And if you're wondering, I pinched my nerve, so my arm is a little bit of a mess. So please don't mind if I look like I'm holding my arm weird. It's because I am. And that's, what can you do, right? You get a little older, you pinch your nerves, and everything gets all out of whack. So we have a great show for you today. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things that I think are very interesting that are going on right now, dealing with the 2020 election, dealing with New York State and the elections in 2019, 2020, and going forward, talking about overseas, international. So we're going to be covering a bunch of those things. But first, I do want to mention that my friends and the Belmar Pub and at the Park Diner. If you are in the Binghamton Southern Tier region of New York, please do go down, do visit them. This is not a paid advertisement. They're my friends, and I enjoy their establishments. I love their businesses. Lots of fun, great food. I want you to go and check them out. They are fantastic. So please do that for my friends. They would appreciate the business, and I appreciate them. So I want to talk about a bunch of things that are going on right now. One of the big things that we've seen that have been happening recently is there's a big change in the Republican Party. After the losses that came across in 2018. Okay, in 2018, we had a lot of losses across the nation, whether it's in the Democratic Party, in the Republican Party on the local level, on the state level, on the federal level. We saw losses all over the place. And a lot of that had to do with the indictments against President Trump and trying to claim that he had colluded with Russia. That was the big message for 2018. The Republican Party, every Republican, every conservative was President Trump. And President Trump colluded with Russia. That was the message that was out since literally before President Trump won the 2016 election. That was the message in 2018 in the midterm elections. That is the message essentially today at this moment. And it's been a rally call for progressives across the nation to try and get them to try and defeat Republican candidates and to try and move their messaging forward. And it's been pretty effective. I mean, in New York State, it's been very effective. I mean, New York State now is a single party government. Democrats control everything in the government in New York State. So the state legislature, whether it's the Assembly or the Senate, it's all Democrats. Cuomo, Democrats. It's amazing. And the result has been a further exodus of the population from New York. We've just seen more people continuing to leave and leave and leave New York as progressives and not just Democrats, because there is a difference. Democrats, you can have conversations with. I've had conversations with. Progressives, not so much. They believe in they're right and you're wrong, and that's it. And you have to leave because they're right and you're wrong. It's kind of like why in 2014, Governor Cuomo was was doing the State of the State address and said very clearly that he wanted conservatives, people who believe in God, who believe in the Second Amendment, people who don't agree with him to leave the state, which had already been happening and just accelerated from that point going forward and still are. That's why New York State at this moment leads the nation in the exodus. We've lost about 1.5 million people, if you're not including illegal aliens. And you're talking about net overall, we're going to lose at least 2 members of Congress, bringing the state down to 25 members of Congress in the House of Representatives representing us. That's a problem. It's a loss of power. It's a loss of federal funding. It's a loss of prestige. It's a lot of things. But most of all, it's saying that the policies that are going on don't work. And in the face of policies that aren't working, where businesses and people are leaving, in February of 2019, this year, we heard Governor Cuomo mention that, well, yeah, he taxed the rich and they left. And New York State has $2.3 billion less in tax revenue than the year before because people took their money, took their business, and got out of the state. That was his estimate. And in March, early April, we found out the number is actually over $3 billion of a shortfall. At the same time that we had another, I believe it was $2 billion in tax increases, whether they were called fees or tax increases, it doesn't matter. It's a tax increase. So roughly about $4 or $5 billion totally in the hole, losing money in New York State. And the answer by Democrats, by the progressive movement, the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Bernie Sanders movement of the party is, let's go further left. Let's keep pushing to the left. Let's abandon the center of the nation, which is generally center right, but let's keep going to the furthest of the left. Let's go to socialism. Let's go to communism. Let's keep going to the left rather than trying to compromise or to negotiate or to just respect the people who are on the other side of the lane. I see that here in the New York 22nd District. We have the candidate who won the seat was Mr. Anthony Brindisi. And Mr. Anthony Brindisi was strongly supported. His main core support was from Citizen Action, Black Lives Matters, Antifa, the far left progressive fringe of the Democratic Party. Indivisible New York, all of these organizations are far left. And that's where his main support came from Nancy Pelosi, also left-leaning, progressive-leaning. And this is where we saw the nation go, again, because Trump was colluding with Russia. So we were told, and then we were told, as we have found out, that that's not correct with the Mueller report. So all of this, I say all of this, to bring us to a very simple conclusion. New York State can't keep going this way. The nation can't keep going this way. And that's why we're seeing right now a change. And that change is Nick Langworthy. It's now been announced and it's confirmed that the head of the GOP in New York State, Ed Cox, is leaving, and Nick Langworthy, who's 38, is stepping in. By the way, Ed Cox is 73. Ed Cox was the son-in-law of President Nixon. So he had a lot of name recognition. He was very well liked in Manhattan by those who, the donors, the big money donors. So the big money donors really, really liked Ed Cox. Nick Langworthy, 38, is an upstart. He's new. He's young. He's very different. And not everyone is comfortable with that. Not everyone wants to make the change. Basically, we saw that Governor, and I'm identifying an article here for those who are just listening to the audio. You'll see the article is by Buffalo News, how Nick Langworthy outmaneuvered Ed Cox to lead the state GOP, which was published May 20th of 2019. And so we're seeing that a lot of people are very unsure about this. I can tell you in my region, in the Broome County region, we've heard that Broome County is one of those who are supporting Mr. Cox. A lot of people want to stick with what they have seen. Even though after a decade of leadership, we've seen nothing but failure. We've lost. Of the people who are leaving New York State, the majority tend to be conservative. They tend to be Republicans. They tend to be business owners in the middle class. Just last year, in the Putnam-Westchester region, 28,000 people left, taking on average $48,000 in revenues with them. That's businesses, that's middle managers, that's the middle class. So you can't say that Ed Cox was doing a great job. We lost seats, we lost population, we have lost. New York isn't better for any of this. So that's a problem. And so now Nick Langworthy is coming in, and he's looking to make a big change. Will it be enough? That's a good question, because he's getting support in a lot of places, but not everywhere. As I said, in the Broome County region, the chairman of the Republican Party had decided on his own that he believed that Nick Langworthy wasn't the man to go for. He wasn't the person to support. And you know that in Manhattan, many people also had that same feeling. But the rest of upstate New York do believe we need a change. Does that mean we're going to see that change implemented in the places that we're looking for Ed Cox as leadership? Are they going to be willing to change? I can tell you that Broome County, my opinion, I don't think so, based on the chairman and his past actions, but we'll see. Will that mean that in 2020, will the Republicans in New York State be able to retake the Senate? The Assembly is almost impossible. It's never going to happen. And that's just something silly to expect. But in controlling the state Senate, which is reasonable, and something that is attainable, if they were to regain that, something that they've had since 2006 up until this year, last year's election, 12 years, to regain that would make a big difference, and it's attainable, but will we see it happen? And I have to tell you, many people believe, and including myself, that's not going to happen. I believe that you're going to see New York State continue down a progressive path for the next decade, possibly two. Not that it will help New York at all. New York will continue to be in debt. It will continue to lose population. It will lose importance in the government as we lose more and more seats in Congress. And it will be less notable. The biggest thing that makes New York notable right now is Wall Street. That's about it. Take out Wall Street and there's really nothing left in the state because they have destroyed it consistently. Kind of like what we've seen in Baltimore, what we've seen in Chicago, what we've seen in Detroit. And every time we look at cities and states that have been dominated by the Democratic Party without any change, we've seen that they have failed. Dramatically, demonstrably, horribly failed over and over again. New York State is another example of that. It isn't as extreme as, say, Chicago with its several thousand people being shot every year and killed every year. It's not as in such disrepair as, say, Detroit or, say, Baltimore, but it's not far from it. Depending on where you're looking, where the cameras tend to be Manhattan. But if you're looking at upstate New York, in towns that have been devastated, where populations have dropped by over 50%, if you're looking at parts of upstate where people have left in droves and many towns are like ghost towns with economic prospects that don't exist, yeah, you're looking at a problem. And this is something I think will continue. That's my opinion. You may disagree, and that's fine. We can definitely have that conversation. I look forward to seeing what Mr. Langworthy is going to do to try and turn this around, to try and modernize the GOP in New York State, to try and address a lot of the issues that I'm talking about right now. But that's not the only thing we wanted to talk about here. There's obviously a few other things that are going on. We want to go into a little bit about our good friend, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Oh, she's such a joy. If you remember last week, Kirsten Gillibrand is doing so well in her attempt to run for the presidency that Senator Cory Booker, had to direct his team, his campaign team, as well as to reach out to the public and ask them to support his opponent, Gillibrand. And as I mentioned in a previous commentary, lost my word there for a second. In a previous commentary, I had mentioned how this is a very Machiavellian move, that for Booker, all this means is a positive. It's going to improve his position net, because Gillibrand has nothing to gain from this. The best she is going to be able to do is she's going to owe him a political favor, and he's going to be able to collect on that any way he wants. She has no choice. Any success she has going forward is all due to Cory Booker. And so I wanted to look at what has been the result. What happened? And I just go to Real Clear Politics, looking at their 2020 Democratic presidential nomination polling data. Now, polls are good and bad. They're a mixed blessing. But looking at this and looking at the trend overall, what we see is that Kirsten Gillibrand is basically at the same spot she's been at. She was at about 0.7%, less than 1% on the national polling. And she has been even after she lied to New York State in her 2018 re-election bid. She has never gotten really over, I think she had one time that she was at 2%. And I'm just double checking. Yeah, she's been at 2% a handful of times and never above that in any of the national polls. No one is interested in her campaign, which is why she needs Cory Booker to back her up. But And so she moved up, though, to exactly 1% in the most recent polls. That's with Fox News and Morning Consult, two national polls, and we see that she moved up to 1%. Wow, a 0.03% increase. Cory Booker, on the other hand, has pretty much maintained, if not improved, his position a little bit. I believe in my last conversation about this, he was at about 2.4%. Now he's at 2.5%. It's a 0.1% difference. Ooh, big deal. But more importantly, he's come in the last couple of polls at 3% solidly, whereas he had been mixed beforehand. So his hopes are slightly improved. And this is probably because of the Gillibrand. She moved up a little bit. He moved up a little bit. But neither of them are moving anywhere near enough to really be of interest. They're still not up to Beto O'Rourke, who continues to maintain a 3.5 national polling average. We're seeing them nowhere near Buttigieg, who's at 7%. Kamala Harris maintains at 7.3%, amazingly. Elizabeth Warren, 8.8%. And of course, the two big leaders, Joe Biden at 38.3% and Bernie Sanders at 18.8%, which at this moment continues to show that Joe Biden, who is relatively a moderate considering the crowd of people he's competing against, and even he is going left-leaning, it still maintains the lead by double digits on everybody, which is kind of interesting. But I still think that you'll probably see more women win this race than anything else. But I do want to talk a little bit more about Senator Gillibrand, because I want to say shame on you, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Shame on you. I'm talking Game of Thrones kind of shame on you. And she did talk about Game of Thrones, where she made it more political based. But more importantly, something else that she had mentioned just in the last couple of days. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand is a very well-known yes woman to the Democratic Party. She agrees with all of the issues, and as far as the party goes left, she's right there with it, which is a big reversal. If you look at her history and look at her before she became senator, back when she was a member of the House of Representatives, back when she was a congresswoman, she was very conservative. She reflected the views of her constituents. And since then, once she became senator, she became the yes woman to Senator Schumer. Now she thinks she can run for president, even though no one cares what she's doing. And she's been big on the issues of identity and gender politics. She is the gender politics candidate. That she has hands down. But she's also made some forays into other issues that she thinks are going to help her. In particular, one of them is trying to be pro-illegal aliens. She supports the illegal aliens. And I say that because in an article from Politico, published on May 19th, stating the article titled, Gillibrand says she would not detain immigrants. Again, Gillibrand says she would not detain immigrants. There's a couple of things she says in there that really just amaze me, and shame on her for saying this. She says that she would not, well, besides the fact that she says she's not going to detain the immigrants, and she says they don't need to be incarcerated, which does happen now for some of them. If, and I'm quoting her, quote, if they, meaning illegal aliens, are given a lawyer and given a process, they will follow it. They can go into the community in the way we used to handle these cases under the Department of Justice. Let's stop right there. What is she talking about? Kirsten Gillibrand, you have no idea what you're talking about. Because Kirsten Gillibrand, we see that, one, first of all, they're not immigrants. We're talking about illegal aliens. Legal immigrants aren't the question. And mixing the terms, you're just trying to confuse people because they're not the same thing. You're emotionally trying to confuse people by saying immigrant. They're not immigrants. They are in this nation because they have actively and willfully violated the law and are seeking to avoid prosecution from the law from the government for the laws that they have broken. That is not an immigrant. That is an illegal alien. That is the legal term. That's what it means. And it's a fact. It's not disputable. You can call it something else if you want to. That's to make it sound great. That can be like saying that you're a social engineer when you're a janitor. It sounds really nice, but that's not what you do. That's not what it is. You're still a janitor. They're still illegal aliens. They still have broken the law. And she wants to take these illegal immigrants, many of whom who have not been vaccinated, which is the number one leading cause of why measles and other infectious diseases are suddenly becoming more rampant and more popular across the nation. It's not because kids didn't get vaccinated, because if you're not vaccinated in an area where there is no need for a vaccination, if you're in an area where measles has been essentially eradicated, you're not going to have an outbreak of measles. But if you introduce a bunch of people who come from another country where there's poor health care, where people have not don't have the best of health and have not been vaccinated, and they come into our nation with those diseases, well, yeah, you're going to see an outbreak. And we have. And it's pretty funny that it correlates that some of the highest zones of illegal immigrants is also the highest zones of measles outbreaks. So yes, should they be detained? I think so. If nothing for then just national health. Get them, if they're going to be in the nation while we detain them, get them vaccinated. Obviously, it seems to be necessary. But she, Kirsten Gillibrand doesn't see that. She thinks it's okay. Let's introduce these individuals with the potentials of the immunodeficiencies that they may have. And again, not all of them, but you don't need all of them, just some of them to have that. And their questionable legal backgrounds, many of them gang members. We know this. This has been proven. This is a fact. Some of them may be, in fact, threats to the nation because we've heard many Islamic groups, fanatical Islamic groups, say that they're going to infiltrate these organizations to try and get into the United States. So we have these individuals who are criminals, who have willfully broken our law, who may be a health risk to our nation, may be a security risk to our nation. She wants them just running around with you and your kids every day. That's stupid. No wonder she's at 1% on the national polling. That's stupid. That's a horrendous idea, that you want to expose people to these dangers. This is what she thinks should be done as a president. But she goes on. She goes on to mention that what she wants to do is, and I will quote this, and I want you to see it as I go through, and again, I'm still on that political article. She says, what I would do is actually fund the border security measures that are anti-terrorism, anti-human trafficking, anti-drug trafficking, and anti-gun trafficking. And I would defund those for-profit prison systems that are harming children and harming families that are seeking asylum. Okay, so now she's gone into two different things. First of all, an illegal alien breaking our law, crossing our border, is not the same thing as someone seeking asylum. They're not the same. And this is real simple. If you're seeking asylum, say from Guatemala, you don't have to go to California to cross the border. You can go into Texas. It's 1,000 miles closer to Guatemala. Why are Guatemalans traveling an extra 1,000 miles to go to California through the border rather than through Texas? Because in Texas, they would be asked if they're seeking asylum or not, and they would have to prove it. In California, they don't care. California wants the illegal aliens to come in, and they don't care. Texas does. That's why they're going to California. That's why they're going an extra 1,000 miles with no food, no water, no hope or necessarily any idea of if they will be allowed into the nation and or with their children, if they are their children, which is a torture to the children, and that is a negative. That's a child abuse. But let's forget about all that. The thing that I find real interesting, again, is that Kirsten Gillibrand said that she wants to fund anti-terrorism, anti-human trafficking, anti-drug trafficking, anti-gun trafficking. I'm not even going to touch the gun trafficking right now, but let's just make this real simple. Then that means you need to fund the wall. The border wall stops, well, at least limits or slows down terrorism, human trafficking, drug trafficking, gun trafficking. It accomplishes all those things with one action. You put in a wall, you slow down the number of people who can be a terrorist threat, who can be a trafficking threat, that can be drug trafficking or human trafficking, that can traffic in guns. You secure the border. And yet, she is against the border wall. Does this make sense? This is stupid. She is stupid. It is a stupid concept. But I want to get into this because it's amazing what she's saying, and this is not unique to Kirsten Gillibrand. These are comments that are being made by all of the candidates because they think this is going to promote them and get them to move closer. This is being said by Joe Biden, by Bernie Sanders. This is what the leaders of the race are saying, and the rest of them are trying to promote this, that they believe it too, so that they can get more votes. And I think this is a failed, stupid idea. Personally, that's what I think. You may disagree. Tell me if you do. But what we'll do is we're going to take a quick break because obviously I have a neighbor next to the studio. We have some gardening going on, so it's some background noise. We'll try and see if they finish by the time we get back. We'll take a quick break and then we'll be right back with you.
You tell me you're different. You say you got some things and you're working on it. Oh, but I never listen. No, was too busy thinking you're the perfect one. It's such a mystery, cause usually I'm looking for a reason to stay. But who would have believed that here I be and I just can't look away. Tried to give me a warning, so watch your step before you fall too hard. You tell me I'm crazy, I say not crazy enough, but I'm crazy for you, crazy, crazy about us. And I know that it's true, baby, it may be too much, but I'm crazy for you, crazy, crazy in love. Get if you're thinking you're alone and now you feel. I wanna show you the difference. If you let me, I could show you something real. It's such a mystery, cause usually I'm looking for a reason to stay. But who would have believed that here I be and I just can't look away. You tried to give me a warning, so watch your step before you fall too hard. You tell me I'm crazy, I say not crazy enough, but I'm crazy for you, crazy, crazy about us. And I know that it's true, baby, it may be too much, but I'm crazy for you, crazy, crazy in love. giving up on you. Never giving up, never giving up, never giving up, never giving up on you. Never giving up, never giving up, never giving up, never giving up on you. Never giving up, never giving up, never giving up, never giving up on you.
All right, folks. Thank you for being with us here on No Soundbites Allowed. And I am your host, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier. And we are watching this, of course, on the Exceptional Conservative Network. Please do check out some of the other great artists on the program, like Dr. Jane Ruby and Ken McClinton and so many others. We do a great program here trying to get out the conservative thought that you don't get to hear everywhere else. The unique and local views and national views. So please do check them out. And of course, if you are in the Binghamton, New York area, please drop by my friends at the Belmar Pub and the Park Diner. Great establishments with great food, great drink, and most importantly, good people. That is not a paid advertising. They are my friends, and I do just recommend them. Please check it out. With that said, so we're talking about a fun person, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who is a candidate for the 2020 Democratic nomination. She is currently sitting at about 1%, and that's about where she's been since the day that she announced that she is looking for the presidency. No one cares about her too much, but what's more important are the issues that she is out there promoting, are the issues that everyone on the Democratic ticket are promoting, and that they are trying to convince people you should be interested in, that these are the issues you should want. And in particular, we're talking about the article from Politico on May 19th, where she's saying that she would trust illegal aliens, individuals who have already broken the law of the United States, and she would just trust them to be able to be around everyone else and just run around, even though she wants to secure the border to prevent terrorism, to prevent human trafficking, to prevent drug trafficking, and to prevent gun trafficking. These things that are very important, which you would think most people would agree with, and yet she doesn't want to use the most effective way to protect people, which would be a border wall, which effectively does what she says it should do, slow down, if not stop, all of those things. Rather, she wants to go through some other system, which many of the people in her party are trying to get rid of as well, the other means to protect us, which is ICE, from those illegal immigrants that have broken our law. So it's very convoluted here, and I don't understand what the goal is. And I don't think anyone really realizes how dumb this is. I know she's saying that, and I say it's dumb, and I don't mean to pick on her. I'm not trying to be personal here. This is a dumb policy. The way she has stated it, what it says, is a dumb policy. Not that she is dumb. The policy is dumb. Because, one, you're not going to address the very simple, most obvious way to stop a lot of this, or to prevent or slow down a lot of this, which is a border wall. That is the first, most simple, cheapest way to help control and secure our border against all the things that she has named that she wants to protect Americans from. And yet she won't do it. It makes no sense. That is dumb. When you have a policy that doesn't go, it's Occam's razor. The best answer is often the simplest answer, or the answer is often the simple answer. This is the simplest answer. You put up the border wall, you slow down all of the problems and makes it more controllable. You secure the border. But she doesn't want to do that. But she also made an allegation in this. She made a claim that, all you have to do, don't worry, let the illegal aliens into the nation because they're not immigrants. They broke the law. They don't have authorization to be here. So she said, let the illegal aliens into our nation, and don't worry, they'll go to court to be able to see if they can stay in the United States. That's not true. That's not even close to true. Because just on January 27th of 2019, the article is from the Washington Examiner, and it says, the headline, New Crisis, 43% of illegal immigrants skip court hearings, 49% for minors. That's the article's title. So right there, we know instantly she's talking about something that's just crazy. We're talking about almost half of all of the illegal aliens that have a hearing where they're supposed to show up to determine whether or not they can be in the United States legally, and they don't show up, which would make you believe that 40% of the illegal aliens are in fact not asylum seekers, that they just broke our laws and they used the excuse of asylum or the excuse of having children with them to be able to get into our nation, because some soft-hearted politician like Kirsten Gillibrand, it will use the issue, the emotional heartstrings of America, and say, you have to take care of these people. We can trust them, and it's okay. And then they don't show up. And then some of them go on to commit crimes like drunk driving, murder, and various other crimes. This is a problem. This is a problem. And she doesn't even want to address that. I mean, remember, back in January, we were told by the Democratic Party that there wasn't even a border crisis. I mean, I'll give her that. She's finally admitting, after the fact, that there is a crisis at the border, something that has been said consistently by the last 3-4 presidents in a row. But finally, under President Trump, she's now saying that there is a border crisis that we all knew and recognized already. When 15,000 people show up at your door out of the blue, uninvited, and they're trying to forcibly enter your property, that's a crisis. I don't care who you are. If 15 people showed up at your door, tried to break down your door to get into your house, you would call that a crisis. Okay? That's a crisis. It's our border, same difference. Not a difference there. 15 people trying to break down your door, 15,000 people trying to cross our border. It's the same thing. That is a crisis. So she's finally admitting that, but she doesn't want to improve the security at the border by actually putting up a fence, which you might do for your house. If you're constantly getting people trying to break down your door, you may want to put up a fence to give yourself a little more room, make it a little bit harder for them to get onto your property to then try and break down your door. That seems logical. Instead, she's saying, no, open up the door, let them walk into your house, and once they're in there, they may decide to stay, or maybe they leave. They'll have a conversation with you, and then they'll see how they feel about it. Are you crazy? I don't understand this. You know what? I do understand it. You know where this comes from? It comes from this.
My real objection is that I want to get to the Golden Hill, but I don't think that's the way to get there. I believe one of the greatest human failings is to prefer to be right than to be effective. And political correctness is always obsessed with how right it is without thinking of how effective it might be. I wouldn't class myself as
And there it is. What he just said, Stephen Fry, at the Monk debate, made it very clear. Progressives want to be right. It doesn't matter if it's the right answer. It doesn't matter if it's the correct solution. They want to be right. And that's why we have to deal with this. And I have to think about it. When we see this, when a wall is the simple answer, when we know that 50% of those who are illegally entering our nation are not showing up for the appointments in the courts, to say that, well, we can have an open door policy and we can trust them to show up in our courts and we can trust them to have the vaccinations and immunizations that will protect the people they're standing around, and we're seeing everything is saying that that's not true, then you are deluded. No, Kirsten Gillibrand absolutely doesn't deserve to be a presidential candidate, because that doesn't make any sense about what she's talking about. None whatsoever. And by the way, I didn't get into it. I spoke about it, but one of the articles about the Democrats who were refusing to fund the wall and calling it immoral That was back on December 28th of 2018. And that's from an article from pbs.org. Democrats refuse to fund Trump's immoral wall. So you can look that up for yourself. And if you're listening on the show, on the audio, you'll be able to see that. So let me move on. We got about 15 minutes left. So let me move on. I wanted to talk about a little bit about Switzerland. Now, a lot of people may not be familiar with this, but as of the 19th, Switzerland decided to add in gun control. Switzerland needs gun control. According to an article by the BBC.com on May 19th, Switzerland gun control voters back the European Union regulations. Really? Why? Literally about 50%, almost 50% of the people in Switzerland own a gun. There's well over 3 million people in Switzerland that are known to have been in the military and kept their gun their firearm from when they served in the military, which is mandatory in Switzerland. It's mandatory. Men from the age of 16 to 65 are considered members of the Swiss Army, and they get to keep their firearm for a national emergency, just in case they have to be called up to duty. But they are considered members of the military, 16 to 65, unless that number has changed recently, and I'm not aware that it has. So you're looking at a nation that has an incredible amount of, there's only 8 million people. Basically, all of Switzerland is the size of, basically New York City, okay? But imagine that. Imagine half of New York City is armed, which probably is true. But imagine that half of New York City is armed, and they have one of the lowest rates of murder and homicide in the nation. 8 million people, and only 45 people were killed. And this is the data may be a little bit old. This is as of 2016. In 2016, the number of people who were killed in Switzerland was 45. Now, in total, there were another 187 attempts at murder, but in total, 45 people were murdered. So a total of 232 cases. So roughly 1 in 5 of the attempts of murder actually succeeded. Half of all of the attempts and or murders in Switzerland were done by foreigners. Only half, about 102, were done by Swiss citizens. So if you're looking at that, so that means out of the 45 people who were killed in Switzerland in a murder, roughly about 22 of them were by Swiss citizens. The Swiss are pretty safe. They're not concerned about, the last time there was a mass shooting in Switzerland, it was in 2001. In 2001, that was the last time that they had a mass shooting. And you can verify that. You can check out the article that was done by BusinessInsider.com, Switzerland gun laws, rates, and rates of gun deaths, 2018. This article came out on, I believe it was December 11th of 2018. Switzerland has a stunningly high rate of gun ownership. Here's why it doesn't have mass shootings. The last mass shooting in Switzerland was in 2001. A guy went crazy. He killed 14 people and himself. That was in 2001. For a nation that has 50%, roughly 50% of the nation owns firearms, and they have a population of 8 million people. That's just ridiculous. Chicago prays for the day that they could have anything even close to that. Chicago prays for the day that they could cut the number of murders and attempted murders in half. There are literally days, just a single day in Chicago that'll have as many, if not more, attempts and or successful murders than Switzerland has had in a year. And we're talking, okay, and they have less people in Chicago than there are in all of Switzerland. And there's 50% of the population in Switzerland with firearms. So I say all of that to come back to this idea that Switzerland, for some reason, voted to put in gun control. It's obviously not going to make anyone safer. They are already safe. This doesn't make anyone better off. Why in the world would Switzerland agree to this? What reason could they have? Well, as it turns out, if you look at the article by the BBC about this, one of the biggest reasons why they decided to do this is because if they didn't, they would lose out on trade deals. That's the problem. They would lose trade deals. So the European Union is using economics to force the people of Switzerland to do what they want. And the people of Switzerland who have been convinced that gun ownership is absolutely deadly. I mean, 2015 Paris, the terror attacks, which were done with cars in part, all of these, I'm thinking of Nice, France, the car attack there, but these attacks from foreigners who have come into their nation because of the open borders and killed natives of their nations. This is such a danger because of the guns that exist, even though that doesn't exist in Switzerland. This is a problem because I guarantee you're going to hear people like Kamala Harris, you're going to hear people like Beto O'Rourke, you're going to hear Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and probably Kirsten Gillibrand, as well as on the local level, people like Anthony Brindisi, Representative Anthony Brindisi, running around saying, look, the Swiss get it. The Swiss, they got rid of their, they're getting rid of their guns. They want gun control. They want to be more like Australia or New Zealand, excuse me. They want to be more like New Zealand. They want to get rid of guns. No, I don't think they really do. I think they want the deal. I think they want the economics. But there's no way you're going to tell me that Switzerland's going to be more safe from the 50% of people from outside their nation that are running around in their country committing crimes because they have less access to firearms. Because they're less able to protect themselves, they're suddenly going to be safer than they were before. I would predict that you're going to see Switzerland, the number of deaths, the actual number of murders go up. And I would suggest and I would believe that it's going to go up significantly. That's going to be, and it's going to be for the sole reason that foreigners in their lands are going to be able to kill more people without having to worry about anyone defending themselves. That you're going to see terror attacks in Switzerland because the people will be less able to protect themselves from a government, or rather from individuals who don't like their government. And the government will be incapable of being able to protect them because the government can't be everywhere all the time for everyone. Unless you happen to be walking around with a police officer following you everywhere you go, which tends to be elected officials. They get to have, Bernie Sanders has a detail that's watching out for him, his security detail. We see that for Joe Biden. Yes, you're running for president, you're a high-profile politician, you get a security detail that follows you around that will make sure that you're okay. The average citizen down the block doesn't have a police officer with them, so when someone tries to break into your house, you can call the police, and in the 3 minutes, if you're lucky, 3 minutes that it takes for the police to show up to your door, what's going to happen? And as we know from most mass shootings and most gun violence events that are not suicides, the first minute and a half is where the most danger exists. In that first minute and a half, that's where the most people die. So in the 3 minutes that you're waiting for the police to show up to your door, if they can show up in 3 minutes, what's going to happen? Who's going to defend you? The government? They're not there. The law? Criminals break the law. That's why they're called criminals. The deranged? They don't understand laws. That's why they're deranged. Who's going to protect you? And this is true in Switzerland, as it's true in New York City, as it's true in Chicago, it's true everywhere in the United States. I think this is a very troubling trend we see with Switzerland. This is a very troubling thing because, again, it goes back to we see that the progressive left are looking to be right. Not to be, they just want to feel that they are right. It doesn't matter if they are right, that they have the right solution, that this is the best answer, that this is the best way to achieve the goal of safety for everyone. They don't care about that. They want to feel right. They want to go to sleep at night going, well, we have now banned all the guns. Everyone will be safe. Even though that's absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. If that were the case, then there wouldn't be armed guards in front of prisons. There wouldn't be armed guards at banks. You wouldn't see armed guards surrounding high-profile politicians being guarded by armed guards. If that were true, then you wouldn't need any of that. Kamala Harris, who is a gun owner and who carries a gun, a concealed carry firearm, wouldn't need that if it were, well, get rid of the firearms and you're safe. If she truly believed that, then she should give up her firearm and she should make sure she has no security detail and she'll be okay because she has no one who's armed, who is dangerous, that is around her, and therefore no one would ever bother her. But she obviously, as a former prosecutor, as a member of Congress, of the Senate, Congress, knows better than that. Someone who's out amongst the public knows that deranged and criminal people don't care about laws. And people who are terrorist tendencies or indications and do not respect the governments that they happen to be, of the nations that they happen to be in, they don't care. You're not going to make anyone safer. Mark my words, Switzerland will become a less safe nation. They will become more like the rest of Europe. They will become more like other nations in the world where they and you will see, I am sure of this, that as they have fewer and fewer firearms, they're going to have more and more people die. And I hope to be wrong. I hope I am wrong. But I truly believe the difference between 45 homicides in 2016 and 0 is not taking away the firearms that already exist, that have already existed for the history of Switzerland. Something that the people are accustomed to, that they have grown up with, that they train with. The difference is not getting rid of semi-automatic firearms, whether it's a handgun or a rifle. That's not the problem. If it were a problem, the 8 million people in Switzerland would all be dead. If we were to believe that firearms are as dangerous and deadly as they say. Half the nation would be dead because the other half would have killed them by now. That's not the case. Mark my words. You're going to see a difference. They're going to be part of the European Union. They're going to be more like everyone else. And everyone else has higher homicide rates. Fewer guns legally allowed, more deaths anyway. With firearms, with knives, with cars, with bombs, from terrorists and bad people. If there's nothing else to take away from that, take that away. But I hope that you've enjoyed the show today. We're right at time, and I wish I had more time because there's so much more and more details I wanted to get into. But I thank you, and please remember that on Saturday, the 25th, we're going to have our 200th episode. We'll have some guests in. It'll be a great show, but I look forward to seeing you there. And until then, I thank you for joining me, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, here on No Soundbites Allowed and on the Exceptional Conservative Network. I look forward to speaking to you again very, very soon. Thank you.